I went to Catholic school for 12 years, which quite possibly explains why I'm not a Christian anymore. Now, when I first started making this transition, I expected to have a lot in common with my fellow non-Christians. But over the years, I've come to discover, much to my disappointment, that theological implications aside, the worldview of Christians tends to be far superior to that of other faiths, or as in my case, non-faiths. Now, I've listened to many people over the years who tie themselves up in philosophical knots, trying to fit the square peg of faith into the round hole of logic. I'm not saying that faith is irrational by definition, but by definition, it does not require objective proof in order to exist. That is to say, I assume that the faith would exist even if there was no proof at all. So why spend so much energy trying to support it in that way? Anyway, if you do not have faith, then all you have is logic. So you would think that the non-faithful would be scrupulously logical, and that they would develop their political and philosophical beliefs based on objective fact and nothing else. Shockingly, to me at least, you find a disproportionately high number of socialists among these non-faithful. And socialism, if you've watched this channel at all or indeed done any kind of quantitative research to determine the best philosophy for humans, is the most heavily documented failure in human history. It fails the rich, it fails the poor, it fails everyone in between so spectacularly that I find it academically amazing that the concept even exists in any meaningful form. And as I said previously, maybe 100 years ago, there was an excuse for socialism, maybe, because we didn't know for certain that it was an abject failure. Now, people like Ayn Rand and others worked this out through logic, much the way Einstein worked out some of his theories prior to the existence of convincing supporting information. But the data proving the failure of socialism, it didn't exist yet. Well, it does now, and it exists in such depth and breadth that it's probably the most heavily documented and provable failure in the history of human society. Yet, there it is, and like I said, being propped up largely by the complete disconnect from reality, somehow maintained by the non-faithful. Christians, on the other hand, tend to be, there's always exceptions, capitalists. And that may be surprising to some, considering the love thy neighbor as thyself messaging you find in the Bible, especially the New Testament. Old Testament, maybe not so much. But the point is, by and large, Christians have not interpreted this messaging to mean love thy neighbor as thyself or else. They've been able to interpret the nuance accurately, I think, that the Bible provides an overall blueprint for, again, specific theological implications aside, a happy, prosperous, and productive society, but not a formula for human micromanagement of individual decisions. They have mostly left the consequences of those individual decisions up to someone who's much smarter than any of us, which is a really good idea. Objective superiority of economic philosophy aside, I just find Christians to be happier, nicer, kinder, and more logical than people of other faiths, or most especially the non-faithful. Now, some of you may be thinking that I'm missing the most important point of all. And you may very well be right. On the other hand, since I have no stake in the game, as it were, hopefully you'll take this message as the compliment it was intended to be. And, well, keep up the good work.